You may heard the phrase grandmother's story. Well, allow me to take you on a journey as I introduce you my grandmother's story. Quite literally. Her life is full of captivating memories and fascinating experiences. It's amazing how much she has accomplished and overcome. Her story is a testament to the power of perseverance and the human spirit, and I can't wait to share with you. As I sit and listen to my grandmother's story, I am transported back in time to Singapore when it was in the 1930s. A story of growing up in a poor family where child slavery was a common theme. It was both heartbreaking but inspiring as well. Despite her circumstances, my grandmother had this adventurous spirit and loved doing things that was considered boyish, such as climbing trees and playing catching with the other boys. She had this natural vigor body where it was unusual for girls of her time, but this wasn't evident in her agility and fearlessness when climbing trees. But one incident during the Japanese occupation stood out in my mind. While she was enjoying longans with a friend on a tree, my grandmother has this audacity of having this idea to thought of an idea that it would be funny, throwing seeds to the Japanese soldier that was few meters away from them, not realizing the danger she was putting herself in. She kept on throwing a couple of seeds, and these Japanese soldiers was slowly getting annoyed by this seed throwing and decided to turn and search for the culprit who was throwing at them. They finally spot my grandmother and her friend at the top of the tree, and they shouted some Japanese word, probably Kisama! And they decided to give chase. What followed was a heart-racing escape as my grandmother and her friend sprinted home with the Japanese soldiers in hot pursuit despite the danger. My grandmother never lose her cool. She knew that she had to act quickly if she wanted to survive. So when she arrived home, she just grabbed the closest mattress she could find and then bundled herself up to make into an armor. And then she wiggled her way to the corner of her house, hoping the armor that she has wrapped around gave some protection from the Japanese soldiers' bayonets. The Japanese arrived shortly after, spotted my grandmother bundle herself up with the mattress. They went to the corner and started stabbing a few times with the bayonet on their rifle and stabbed until they release their coup, realizing that it doesn't have any effect. They just like screw it and they just walk away. And the whole ordeal was a close call, but my grandmother barely received not even a single scratch according to her accounts. That's amazing. My grandmother's story is one of resilience, determination, and fearlessness. After the Japanese occupation in Singapore ended in 1945, she continued to work as a maid, but she didn't enjoy housework at all and have been long want to find a way out. One day when she turned 16, she heard there was a widow with 3 children wanted to marry somebody in the same household where she worked at. It was another girl who worked with her as a maid who was supposed to marry this widow, but she didn't want to marry that guy due to the vastly big age difference. His age was almost twice the age of my grandmother, but my grandmother didn't care and just volunteered herself to marry the widow instead because she finally could leave the household. She finally got married with my grandfather just one day after hanging out with all of her friends without much preparation or no preparation at all. She didn't fancy him at all, but she was finally free from the household she wanted to live. Married life was not easy for her as my grandfather's selfishness made it even more challenging for her. She had to feed not only herself but 9 other children with a meager income of $1 every month from my grandfather, which roughly translates $10 to today's money. To make ends meet, she had to work extra jobs such as cleaning the houses, washing clothes, and also have to go and fight with other people to a house where a rich person will randomly go to the front of the house and throw money to the street. That is how desperate she was to support her family. When it comes to working, my grandmother was a no-nonsense kind of person. So for example, if she is cleaning the house, nobody, I mean nobody gets in her way of her work, or they will face the consequences such as getting hit on the leg by the mop or the broom. And for washing clothes, she hand wash each of them using the washing board and then would proceed to hang them to dry. So usually the people who paid her to do this work would usually give a big pile of clothes and pay her a fixed fee. So the people who paid her appropriately, she would then proceed to clean each of the clothes and then hang it to dry. But for those who try to exploit her by paying lesser than the recommended amount, she would just wash her clothes like intended, and she would just dump it to the side quite close to the longkang or the drain. That's what you get for the amount you pay. My grandmother even set up a stall selling kueh and traditional Malay foods such as nasi lemak. Her nasi lemak sambal was so delicious that she sold it in a glass bottle. She even utilized her children to sell kueh in a basket. All of her hard work paid off, as she was able to afford to send all of her children to school without the assistance of my grandfather. She fed everyone in the family, including my grandfather himself. Although she hated him, but she is still obliged to be a good wife. But she was no pushover and did not tolerate mistreatment from him. So one day, during lunch, she was preparing the food for my grandfather as usual and set them up on the table. But for whatever reason, he was in the bad mood and he just yeeted out the food on the table to the floor, at saying like, "I hate this food," and then just left the house. According to my grandmother, she was calm and composed at that point of time, and she just slowly pick up the broken pieces of plates and collect the food on the floor to the bin. Later at night, my grandfather felt hungry, but he didn't want to talk to my grandmother directly. Instead, he asked one of his sons to relay the message to her. My grandmother just responded with, "The food you want to eat is in the bin there. You want it? Go get it from there. I ain't gonna cook for you anymore." Since then, my grandfather never messed with my grandmother again. My grandmother's fearless attitude extended beyond her determination to provide for her family. There was one, 2 was banging on our neighbor's door very loudly. He was shouting around 2 to 3 a.m. She was annoyed by the disturbance. My grandmother just opened the door to see what was happening. The neighbor who was across her just whispered to her like, "There are 2 trying to collect money on the left side." In spite of the information she was given by the neighbor, my grandmother was undeterred and decided to call the 2 over. Just using her finger to ask them to come over was like, "Come." The neighbor was panicking and gestured her not to do it. But my grandmother don't care. The Along arrived and gave her the what you want face, and my grandmother just calmly told them that their behavior is disturbing the peace and the person that they were looking for is probably long gone. She warned them, if you are not going to leave, the police would come, making it even harder for them to collect their money. The Along was looking fierce initially, become apologetic, and then bow to her even. They even forgot where was the way to downstairs was, that my grandmother was like, hey, 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 it's the other direction. And they were like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then they proceed on. My grandmother's amazing feat just never seems to amaze me. As a child, I was raised by my grandmother since both of my parents are working 9 to 5. So I will obviously just follow her everywhere and watch her butter for things and even cook food. She loved travel around Singapore on buses and even took trips to Johor, Malaysia. She carried all of her stuff with bare hands and don't even need to use a trolley to transport the stuff around. And the thing is, every time she come back from her journey, she could easily hold more than 5 bags each hand and just made it home in time before dinner. It's so crazy that she can just do all that with one trip. My grandmother was an amazing woman who had a remarkable life. Despite facing various challenges, she remained strong and independent all the way to her deathbed. As she grew older, she faced health issues, and I watched her struggle with her mobility. Despite her pain and discomfort, she refused to ask for help and was even furious when she had to go to the hospital. And it was during that time she slipped and fell to the toilet, was quickly transported to the hospital, and confirming our fears that she broke her back, which is the pelvis area, and needed to do some surgery. The doctor was like giving my mother two options, whether to just let her be, because due to her old age, surgery may not be the option. Even putting inserts on her bones, she may or may not recover due to the fact that she was already in her 80s. So my mother just took the chance for surgery to help her, and it was successful, fortunately. Sadly, she passed away a year later after the surgery. I remember feeling conflicted and not knowing how to react when I saw her motionless on her bed. Early in the morning, when my mother just suddenly just wake me up, they say, your grandmother is not waking up. I was quite confused and conflict how to feel about it, because she had been an important figure in my life, and I feel quite grateful for everything she has done for me. I just felt regretted for not having enough time to repay her. It is almost 4 years since her passing, but her legacy lives on in my heart. She influenced me in so many ways, and I always remember her as my legend. In conclusion, my grandmother's story taught me to treasure the time that I have with my loved ones and to always show them how much I care. And it's never too late to express your love, and you will never know that they might leave this world. And may my grandmother rest in peace, knowing that she was loved and cherished. That's all about my grandmother's crazy and wacky story. And thank you for listening to me. See you.